Hello and welcome to How to Deal When the Shit Gets Real podcast. I'm Rietta.
And I'm Connie. And today we are here with James Scott. So James, how do you deal when shit gets real? In other words, just, explain to our listeners a little bit about yourself.
So I'm James Scott. I am originally from Glasgow, Scotland, and now reside 40 miles east in Edinburgh, Scotland. I've been in America in and out since I was a kid. Got a long history, kind of adopted family over there. So came back and forth quite a bit. And that's how I got into sports and started a sports podcast.
Oh, awesome. What's the name of your sports podcast?
Well, it started off as a podcast. It's now a podcast network. So it's Across the Pond Sports Network. We've got Across the Pond Sports Podcast, which kind of covers your NFL and NBA. And then we've got Across the Pond NHL Podcast, which is dedicated to the NHL. And Across the Pond MLB Podcast, which actually just launched this week.
Awesome.
I love it.
So out of all of those sports, which one is your favorite?
Played basketball since I was about 10 years old. And I got to see the Dream Team back in 92, which is what kind of got me into basketball.
Oh, yeah.
Back in Barcelona.
Oh, that's awesome. To see them in Barcelona?
Oh, so I didn't get to see them in person, unfortunately. It was on TV.
I was like, they went to Barcelona? That's really cool.
I wish. I probably wouldn't have known the gravitas that I was in if I had been there. But yeah, you got to see it on TV because in the UK, there was nothing. There was like a big break between like the last track and field event and the like closing ceremony. So they had nothing to show. So they just showed the gold medal game of the basketball. So that was the only reason I actually got to see them.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I was like, really? That's so cool. I mean, it's still cool watching it on TV too, but I was like blown away. I was like, whoa.
So what has drawn you to sports? Not even just basketball, but like all of them.
So I started off with basketball. Basketball was kind of my big thing, and I played in high school and just kind of continued that. And it was a good way, obviously, to stay fit, healthy. And, as a kid, you start to have dreams. You want to go to college, you want to play in the NBA, that kind of thing. And then probably mid-90s, I found American football, or as you guys call it, football. Someone gave me a Dallas Cowboys t-shirt for Christmas. I couldn't even tell you who it was. And I was kind of like, well, they'll be my team then. So I just started supporting the Cowboys from there. And then a few years ago, I got to go to, my parents live in the Bay Area. So they took me out to the Oakland Coliseum. So I got to see my very first baseball game with the Oakland A's. And since then, I've just decided that they would be my team since they were the first team I've seen live and in person.
Yeah, baseball is so different when it's live. I have a harder time myself on TV. I mean, well, postseason baseball is amazing. I can watch that on TV, but regular season can be harder. But in person, like you can't. It's amazing.
Plus the food.
I'm
there for the hot dogs all the way.
100%. I mean, I pigged out when I was there, to be fair. And the way it worked is we were at the Oakland A's in the afternoon, and then in the evening, my basketball team, the Utah Jazz, they were playing the Golden State Warriors about 100 yards across the concourse. So we went from like the Oakland Coliseum right into the Oracle Arena to go watch that. So it was really, really good timing.
A day full of sports. I love it. I was so sad when the Cowboys got rid of Cole Beasley. I love Cole Beasley. So when he left, I was like, no.
I love that your team is like, well, I saw them in person. You are now my team. This is my team. I saw you in person. Done. I love that rationale because other people would be like, no, it has to be this team because they have the best stats. It's like, no, it doesn't matter.
Definitely not a glory hunter. We call that in the UK people who would go and support like Manchester United just because they're the champions. So I'm definitely not one of those. I did when I was younger. I got called that because I was a Cowboys fan, but I was like, well, they've not won a Super Bowl since then, so not my fault.
Well, and that's an even purer reason. It's like, well, I got a t-shirt. They have to be my team now. I'm wearing the shirt.
Yeah. Yeah, we call that bandwagoning here in the U.S.
Yeah.
I'm a Blackhawks fan, so I get accused of that a lot. And I'm like, no. I remember when they were freaking terrible. Not a bandwagon.
And when you live in Chicago, there's no other sport. You are going to like the Blackhawks.
Yeah,
that's
the
it.
Bulls.
For me, at least for my household.
That's what I was
they
gonna
were
say,
like, you will like the Bears, and you will like the Hawks, and you will like the Sox, and you have no choice.
Wow. Because when I was growing up, obviously in the 90s, the Bulls and the Jazz had their 2 years of NBA finals. So like I'd be up till 5 a.m. watching those NBA finals and go to school the next morning, just like, I'm going to go to sleep now.
Basketball is like the one sport that I honestly don't know much about. I do remember the Bulls because I was a young kid being huge in the 90s because everybody was watching it. That was Michael Jordan. That was like the prime time. But other than that, I couldn't really tell you much about basketball myself anyway. So first started reading about you and we had first chatted. You talked about that you have, if I say this wrong, please correct me, neurofibromatosis. Is that right?
Close, really, really close. Neurofibromatosis. So yeah, there's 3 stages of neurofibromatosis. Stage 3 is like you get, when you put a coffee cup down on a bit of paper and it leaves like that ring around, that would be on your skin. So it's non-cancerous, it's non-invasive, it's just like a mark on your skin. The second one, which is the one I've got, basically you get small growths, basically tumors that grow off the ends of nerves. And it can happen anywhere in the body. For me, when I was younger, it wasn't in great places that they decided to grow, but it was what it was. But and number 1, if you have neurofibromatosis 1, that's elephant man disease. So I don't know if anyone ever seen the film with Cher, but that's basically that. But I've got number 2, so I count myself quite lucky that the tumors aren't cancerous. I think statistically, I'm very unlikely to ever get cancer because of that. So I do count myself exceptionally lucky. And it's funny because Hawaii actually kind of plays a role in my story. Because the shit really didn't get real for me until I was like 19. Because I was so young, the first tumor I got was under my eye when I was about 8 years old. It was turning my eye vertical because as it was growing, it was like turning the eyeball. I'm so sorry if anyone's squeamish. And so the doctor called my mom in and he's like, oh, we're going to do a CAT scan and stuff. And they were kind of like, right, okay, so we've done a CAT scan. There's quite a big mass there. And we had this doctor, Dr. Dale. I'll never forget his name because he's a complete douche. And he was an ENT surgeon. And I was 8 years old and cocky and arrogant and stuff. So I was just larking about. And he turned to my mom and he said, right, so you're probably not going to have James for Christmas. So this was October. And so, yeah, my mom didn't take it well, as you can imagine any parent really wouldn't. And she gave me a big hug and I'm like what's going on? Well, what? And I really didn't kind of deal with it in terms of acknowledging it. I didn't acknowledge it at all. And they said, oh, we'll get him in for a biopsy and all the rest of it. So biopsy came back, it's non-cancerous. And he says, right, we'll just schedule and we'll get the tumor out and bang, bang, bosh, and on you go. And that's what happened. And where it took a bit of a turn for the worst was about 3-4 years later. I was starting to get regular scans in my head because they were worried that I'd have a regrowth and all that kind of thing. So, and funnily enough, yeah, a regrowth happened. And however, this tumor had gone a bit deeper. So it was a bit in under the brain. Dr. Dale, on coming back from one of his many golf trips to Singapore, decided that he would go in through the old scar in my face to go and kind of get that tumor out. He said, yeah, it's not a problem at all. And he said, yeah, I can consult with a neurosurgeon. I'll probably do that. This is a small fry to me. So went in, had surgery, woke up a bit groggy, watched Star Trek 6. At the end of Star Trek 6, my mum turned off the TV and I was like, I was going to watch the news or something. And by this point, I'm 14 and I'm kind of a bit older, but not a bit wiser, probably even more cockier than normal. I still just didn't care. Like, I was just like, all right, okay, I've got to a hospital, I've got to have surgery, right, fair enough. And so at that point, my mom turns to me and she says, oh, I need to tell you something. I was like, oh, what's that? They didn't get the tumor out. And I'm like, what do you mean they didn't
What?
get the tumor out? Yeah, Dr. Dale didn't get the tumor out. I was like, well, where
Dr.
is
Dick.
he? Yeah, well, yeah.
Sorry. I just keep on hearing Dr. Dale, and I'm like, yeah, Dr. Dale Dick.
It's funny, I'm pretty sure that's what my mom used to call him. But yeah, so I was like, well, where is he? And she's like, oh, he's not come in. He basically told me and buggered off, probably to Singapore to play golf again. You're going to see this neurosurgeon tomorrow. And I was like, all right, okay, fine. So this neurosurgeon walks in my door, little short ginger guy. I just laid it out on him. Like, I was just so angry. And I think I was more angry that the other doctor had just left my mum to tell me instead of him coming in the room and kind of saying. So I just laid it on him, and he took it, and he took a lot. And at that point, being that young, I'd never used bad language in front of my mum. So yeah, she heard a lot that day as well. And you know what? She never hit me once. I was like, I kept scared.
Yeah, because she feels the same way.
Exactly, because I kept thinking I'm going to get a slap in the back of the head in a minute and told to shut up. But like, she just kind of let me go and get it out. But this Mr. Statham, Patrick Statham, sat there and he kind of explained to me nice and calmly, like what he was going to do. And he'd looked at my scans already and stuff. And, you know, he kind of brought me around a little. And he said, we're going to engage with other surgeons. This is actually going to be such a big operation. It's probably one of the biggest ones he's going to have done in his career by that point. And at that point, he is quite young. I think he's in his late 30s. So for a neurosurgeon, I think that's probably quite young. But he says, what I'm going to do is we're in October, November. I'm going to let you go, enjoy Christmas, and we'll do this in February. And I was like, oh, okay. Can't we just do it now? And he's like, no, it's best if you kind of recover a bit and, you know, rest up. And I was like, all right, cool. So I did a whole bunch more kind of scans and everything. And obviously it was coming to the stage where they were explaining the surgery and that they were going to crack my skull open and basically displace my face so that they could get into this tumor. So they're going to like break my jaw and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, hang on, like people are gonna like be messing around with my face, like it's gonna kind of go back together, like I'm not like Humpty Dumpty or anything. And my mum was kind of like, no, they're gonna put you back together. And
I would hope so.
Yeah, you know, they talked about deficits, it's like muscle and all the rest of it in the face, but they didn't really kind of go into details. And to be honest, I didn't really care at that point. I was watching basketball, I was playing basketball, and shouldn't have been because I just had surgery. So I was getting in trouble for that. But February came around, and the day before surgery, I was a big Star Trek fan back then as well. In Edinburgh, they were having the launch of Star Trek, the exhibition. And Marina Sirtis, who played Deanne Troi, was going to be there. Some very kind people at the Arts Centre in Edinburgh said, would James like to come present flowers to Marina Sirtis?
Awesome.
I was like, wow, that's amazing. And I was on the front page of the newspaper that day, and like the local newspaper, because like this was a big surgery and it was kind of a big deal. So they were kind of like, yeah, we'll have James in, you can take some pictures and all this. And Marina Sirtis, by the way, was lovely. She was so nice, really chatty and stuff.
I imagine her being really lovely because she's such a mellow character. I feel like it would translate.
Yeah. Oh, no. And you know what caught me first, though, is because she was on Star Trek. She had an American accent. And as soon as she started talking, because she's from London, I was like, it totally threw me off.
You were like,
I was like, that's not Counselor Troy. Who's this? This is like an imposter.
Said for me, thanks, because this is weird.
Yeah, this is so weird. So that was like the day before, and then the next day I was going in for surgery. And again, I really didn't understand the gravity of the situation at all. I really didn't. I decided to go in and take my Sega Mega Drive and everything else and TV, because I was going to be in for a while. And Mr. Statham came round and does his pre-op and everything. And again, he's telling me the surgery and he's saying like all this stuff's going to happen and I'm not going to be able to walk for a few days and all this kind of stuff. And it just went right over my head. And I don't know if I didn't care, but I just didn't want to think about it. So I wake up from surgery and I look like I've gone 10 rounds with Frank Bruno or Mike Tyson. It was weird because I was on morphine and you're on like really high doses, like I can't even remember the first kind of week. But what I do remember is, and this is why I've never ever tried drugs in my life, like I've never even smoked, because coming off morphine was like the worst feeling in the world. Like the surgery was easy in comparison to coming off the drugs. So
And you were only on it for a week?
And I was only on it, I was on high doses, but I was only on it for a week. Like I was on adult doses at 14. So
it just shows how strong it is, though. Even though you were on high doses, that's still even, it only took a week for it to have that kind of effect on you.
Yeah, I had to go through like a withdrawal, and they kind of weaned me off it and stuff. So yeah, it was pretty, and I was in a controlled environment, like I was in a hospital. So
yeah.
The surgery itself, though, was only supposed to last about 13 hours, but Mr. Statham managed to do it in 8.
That's
managed
impressive.
To leave me with a nice scar that goes right across the top of my head from ear to ear. 58 staples, a couple stitches because they'd taken a bit of my ear off as well, just for good measure. And so I was kind of like, wow, this has been fun. And like I remember going to the bathroom, like one of the first things I remember, and this is probably a week after surgery, is I go to the bathroom and the nurse says, will you be all right going yourself? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And I was on an adult ward, so I had a room to myself. But I went into the bathroom or the restroom, and there's a mirror there. And at this point, I've not seen myself. And I saw myself, and I just about passed out because I was like, well, that's not me facing me. Because I was unrecognizable just with the amount of bruising and everything else, and swelling.
That had to be terrifying.
I immediately thought Elephant Man disease, because that's what they've been talking about before. And I was like, oh, that's what it looks like. It doesn't, thankfully. And I went through, obviously, rehab and stuff. And I was very fortunate to have Mr. Statham. And I still see Mr. Statham today. This was 25 years ago now. So I was very, very lucky to have Mr. Statham as my neurosurgeon. And he had kind of brought me through what was a very traumatic surgery. And he always kind of made sure I was okay and all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't until I got a bit older, you start living your life and you leave school and you get a job and all this kind of thing. I don't know if you guys ever watched ER back in the 90s. Being from Chicago, I'd imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I watched Dr. Green. Like, he was one of my favorite characters. Him and Carter were like my favorite characters. And Dr. Green had a brain tumor. Mm-hmm. It was cured and he was fine and everything else. And then a couple of seasons later, or a season and a half later, he had another tumor in the brain. And I was like, wow, that's really weird. He's got another tumor. They went through a whole storyline of him kind of going, and like everyone knew, I think he was leaving at the end of the season anyway, and that this was his kind of farewell. He went to Hawaii with his daughter in the last episode, and he was basically saying his goodbye for whatever reason. I have absolutely no idea why. It just hit me, and like reality really kind of set in, and that's like the moment that kind of shit got real for me, because I was like, oh crap, I've had all these surgeries. I've like had this happen and that happen, and I've not really, like, I could have died. And that was the kind of reality. It really kind of sunk in how thankful I should be to be alive, because here's a guy who, he's a TV character, but at the same time, if that's probably has happened, and he's there in Hawaii, he's on the beach, and he's effectively saying goodbye. And that got really real for me. I started to kind of look for answers somehow. You look at religion, religion wasn't for me though. You look at like sports, and I kind of probably got deeper into sports because, I maybe didn't want to think about the bad stuff. And that's when it kind of came rushing back to me, because when I had been younger, my mom had sent me to a psychologist, because she was like, or a psychiatrist, because she was like, something not right here. James isn't dealing with all these surgeries. He's just moving on. He's dealing with it. Yeah. And so I would sit down with these psychiatrists and I'd just beat them, because I'd be like, oh yeah, man, I just like compartmentalize it. I just, got a problem, deal with it, move on. And psychiatrists would buy it because they're stupid. So I just kind of went on like that. But from that point, like there was definitely a build up in me of anger, not resentment, but kind of release of kind of this reality that I really could have died, and it really kind of affected me. Even though like I knew I didn't have cancer and I was very lucky, I kind of felt like I'd kind of taken the piss about it. It really probably wasn't a good, and even in my work life at that point, like I was like a dumb 19-year-old kid who was just messing around. And I decided at that point I would kind of change, become a bit more of an adult. I got like a proper girlfriend who I'm now married to.
Wow.
And I just decided that to do something with my life, so it was actually worth something rather than just kind of winging it, which is pretty much what I did. I just kind of, when you turn 18 in Scotland, I don't know what it's like everywhere else, but in Scotland, you go to the pub and you drink and you kind of fool around with your friends and you mess around and stuff. And that just wasn't a lifestyle that was going to be sustainable. Not if I wanted to have a long life, but drinking and all the rest of it just isn't going to sustain you. And your friends are only going to be along for so long before they kind of start dropping out as well. So like I'd go on like 3-4 day benders and just drink. And it wasn't that I was an alcoholic. It was just, that's just what I did.
Yeah,
And
you're being a teenager.
Yeah. And it was very easy for me to stop. I just stopped cold turkey, and I was like, so I had the odd drink now and again, and that was it. So I was kind of happy with myself in that regard. But I think for me, I got to a place where I needed help.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to see a psychiatrist because I knew that they were full of BS.
Mm-hmm.
So in Scotland, they have the Church of Scotland, and it's a Protestant church. However, what they do is they offer counselling services. And so I went to them, and it's totally non-religious counselling services. It's not like a priest or a minister or anything you meet with. It's basically a volunteer who kind of sits and listens and talks you through your problems with you. And so I sat with them for probably about 20 weeks and kind of talked through like the kind of issues that I'd had and what I needed to kind of get back to feeling me again. Because I do feel like after that, it's weird, after that episode of ER, I really didn't, I looked at the world completely differently and really didn't feel like I kind of fitted, if that makes sense.
So why couldn't you walk after your surgery? I know I'm kind of backtracking a little bit, but what part of it, like, why couldn't you walk? It's just because it was related to your brain?
It was nothing to do with the brain. It was just the amount of drugs and stuff that they were going to pump into me. They didn't want me.
Gotcha.
They didn't want me walking in case I fell and hit my head. I don't think that's something that's like a normal protocol, but I think it was just because of the size of surgery and the amount of drugs and stuff. Like,
okay, that makes sense. I was like, dude, did they like get something in there that you couldn't like it? I was like, whoa, that was huge. But that makes more sense too, because they just had your head open, so they don't want you to fall and hit your head open.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that would have been bad. That would have hurt a lot. Morphine probably would have kicked in again, but yeah, it was just a precaution, I guess, just to make sure that nothing bad happened.
Gotcha. So all the surgeries you had have they all gone back to gross, or have they all gone back to that same one with your head, or have you had different?
So since then, I've had tumors all over.
Okay.
So I think when I was a kid, they all kind of grew in my head and my face and stuff, or neck up. But
That's
since
annoying.
then, but since then I've had one on my shoulder. I've got 3 in my hand. I've got 1 on my wrist, and they kind of just grow all over. I've got 1 on my kneecap.
Does it make your like joints like uncomfortable and stuff, like the kneecap one and whatever else?
So I have young kids, so trying to kneel down is quite uncomfortable because the tumor grows off the end of the nerve, so it causes that kind of response. And then about 10 years ago, I started getting a really strong pain in my face, and it was almost as if someone was like stabbing me with a knitting needle like in the eye.
Ooh.
And I was like this, and I was kind of like, yeah, this isn't fun. And I went to a doctor. I didn't go to my guy. I didn't go to Patrick Statham because I was like, oh, this is my face. I'm not going to go to him for that. I went and they were like, yeah, there's something not right there. We're going to give you a scan because you shouldn't be kind of in that much pain. kind of started prescribing me strong painkillers. Turned out I had another brain tumor.
Goodness.
I was kind of like,
son of a gun.
Well. Yeah, and by this point, like, I'm married. We were expecting our first, I think, at this point.
Oh my gosh.
So our first son was coming along, and yeah, I was kind of like, I could really do without this happening right now.
Yeah.
We've got so much
For sure.
else. I think my wife could as well.
Yeah.
And I've seen some doctors and stuff, and they were kind of like, where it is, it's actually growing where the last one was kind of taken out. So there's a bit of space there for it to grow. And I was like, all right, cool, I can live with that. So a few years had went by, and they said, right, okay, it has grown. So what we're going to do is we're going to send you to Sheffield. Now, I'm in Edinburgh up in Scotland, and Sheffield is down in England. Mm-hmm. And I was like, Sheffield, really? Yeah, there's like this gamma knife radiation therapy you can get. Where they basically, instead of pumping me full of radiation for months with like a chemotherapy or radiation therapy, it was a laser. So I went down there for a day. They shot my head with a laser in this machine. They were just kind of were like, yeah, that'll shrink it now. It won't
cool.
It won't completely get rid of it, but you'll see some shrinkage. After the first two scans, it was like it only went down like a little bit, and I was kind of disappointed. I was like, went through all that for not much. But in the years after that, like it showed significant, because I didn't realize it was like a slow releasing radiation.
Oh, it doesn't happen right away. Okay.
Yeah. So like I was like, after 2 years, I was like, come on, this is terrible. Like the doctor's calling it a win, and I'm like, no, I don't think so. But then after a few years, it did shrink quite substantially, and it hasn't grown since. And
that's
so
good.
It's been like eight years or so that since I had that. So quite happy that it's kind of gone, or it's still there, but it's kind of not grown any. So I still have other tumors around.
There's some tumors hanging around, you know how it is.
And with them, they only get taken out if they bother me.
Just going to ask that. So you don't get them all removed. You only get them removed if you basically have to.
Yeah. So basically, I just say to Mr. Statham, let's get rid of that one because it's bugging me. Like there was one on my shoulder blade, and obviously when you lie down in bed, I was lying flat on my back, and like the pain was just like going through me. So like that one got pulled out, and one on my scalp that got pulled out, and then it was a few years ago. I was just had a regular checkup with Mr. Statham. He says, "Oh, any of the tumors bothering you?" And I was like, "Actually, the one under my arm is really bothering me because the kids, like when I'm toy fighting with them or throwing them around or anything, for whatever reason, like they just keep hitting it every time, and it just sends shooting pains right down my hand." And he was like, "Oh yeah, I'll get that one out. We'll do that next Tuesday." Sorry, we'll do that. He's like, "Yeah, I'll just do it. It's fine." I was like, "Sorry, it's under my arm. You realize that?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Yeah, but you're up here, your head, and this is arm. This is not like a bit below your pay grade."
Wrong body part.
Exactly. I was like, "It's a bit below your pay grade," and he's like, "Nah, I've known you for this long. I can do this one for you as well." So, and that's kind of the relationship that me and him have had since I was a kid.
When you've known him that long, I mean, you kind of get to know each other.
Exactly, and like he's kind
better than Dr. Douche.
Well, exactly. He's probably still in Singapore playing golf, but there's always been a joke about him in Singapore, and I don't know where it came from. I think my mum started it, and I don't know if it was because he was in Singapore or something. But
so I have a question going back to the ER episode. Did the doctor going to Hawaii made you want to go to Hawaii or like travel or anything like that? Or was it kind of the opposite? No, he went there to say goodbye. I'm definitely not doing that.
No, I'd say I wanted to go to Hawaii. I still do. Hawaii is a beautiful place. I think at that point, I was like, I'd said to my mom, like, I want to go to Hawaii. And she was like, why? You've never wanted to go there before? I was like, yeah, but they've got a Sheraton, you can surf, you can kind of do stuff, and you can get a nice beach house that you can kind of just have your own private beach for. Obviously, that's probably not reality, to be fair, but...
Can we switch? Because I want to go to Scotland.
Oh, yeah, we could just do what they do in The Holiday.
Yeah.
We could just swap houses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that'd be awesome. That'd be real fun. Who wants to take Chicago? No one.
I guess we could work you in maybe.
It's fine.
So since you have had all these surgeries and you're constantly keeping track of all your tumors, how do you stay positive and optimistic through all of that?
So I've kind of got back to a place where I don't think about them. Because I think if you do think about them and you do go in on yourself, it can be quite a negative kind of thing. It can so I kind of stuck to sports. Obviously at that point, as I'm getting older, family, because I've got 3 boys now. So,
Ooh, that's a lot.
yeah,
But I
don't
feel
get me
like
much
boys are
time.
way easier than girls because I know I was high maintenance.
Yeah, my wife says that as well. But they're 3 boys, and thankfully we had a test done when Logan, my oldest, was born, and the condition I have isn't hereditary, so it can't be passed on. So
Oh, that's
good.
awesome. That's really good.
That was
That's
like,
a load off.
Yeah, a weight lifted for sure. Plus, you can talk sports with them. I feel like I'm kind of the rare one because my dad and me, we bonded over sports. But with boys, it's even easier. So you can pass that love on to your boys too, and it gives you something to bond over and talk about.
So, do you have any advice for our listeners? Any life advice, sports advice, whatever type of advice you want to give?
Yeah.
I think don't take anything too seriously. If you're in a hole and you have a pile of stress coming your way, don't deal with it how I did and just like fawn it off as nothing. But I think talk to people and talk to the people you're closest to, because I think certainly as I've got older, like I talk to my wife about things all the time and we can talk through tumors, or 2 of my boys are autistic. So like obviously we talk about them quite a lot. So I think if you talk to the people that you know that care about you, and they're going to look out for you, and they're not going to give you any kind of bomb advice. So, and sometimes it's better just to talk about it, just so it gets it off your chest. And it's kind of a bit of a release. And I found that when I was going through the counselling, like I felt so much better after it, because I felt like I'd kind of got it off my shoulders.
So 2 of your boys are autistic. How do you guys deal with that? I'm just curious. We already had a mom on here who had an autistic son. So now I'm like, let's compare notes.
Yeah, no, I listened to that episode. And
oh, yeah?
She kind of pulled on my strings a little, because I was kind of like, oh, wow. But yeah, Tina, I think her name was.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, so our first son is autistic, and it was weird for me because like I'm usually the one that has the medical issues. So it was, I went through about a year of denial that he had autism. I was like, no, he's going to grow out of this. It's fine. It's not autism. Like I knew what autism was and I knew it was a thing, but I was like, yeah, he's just slow at developing. And eventually my wife kind of
was like, nope,
into my head
it's
that,
autism.
This is reality, James. You need to kind of grow up and accept it. And that's where that talking comes in, or a slap around the head, whatever works. And then, so that was fine. We kind of went through with that. And in Scotland, it's different in America, because you have like 3 stages in America, whereas in the UK, you have this massive spectrum of autism that like is just so big and vast that no one actually understands it, I don't think. So we kind of dealt with it, and he's verbal and he talks, sometimes doesn't stop talking.
Wonderful.
And he enjoys dinosaurs, and he still has meltdowns, not very many.
How old is your oldest?
Younger. So he's 11. So he's kind of gone through non-communication to being very communicative, and that has made a massive difference. And then our second son, Carter, he was born, I think almost straight away we knew,
because of the first,
because of Logan, that there was going to be a similar trait. He very much showed that he was autistic, but in different ways. And it was really weird because we were trying to work out, because autism is such a wide thing that no 2 kids are the same.
Yes.
And that's where we kind of struggled a little bit. So we had to kind of learn what Carter's ways were. Now he's non-verbal. He's 5 now, but he's completely non-verbal. And with him, it's been a lot more difficult because obviously he's getting to that age where he's going to be going to school. Now, the laws or the regulations in Scotland and Edinburgh is we have a local authority that thinks that every kid should go to their first year of primary school, regardless of ability. Now, they're talking about sending a kid that can't talk, that still wears a nappy, that still has a dummy. They're talking about sending him to a mainstream school.
Yeah.
And so me and my wife, this is a fight that me and my wife are going through just now, is that we're like, no, that's just not going to work.
Gonna happen.
Like,
it's just not going to work. Yeah.
And like, he's just in his own bubble and he doesn't kind of care what's going on around him. We had a little accident and we had a third. So Cooper came along about 18 months after Carter, and he is not autistic. And he's actually been more of a challenge because we were so used to autism and Logan and Carter.
And you're like, whoa, normal? I don't know what to do with this.
Exactly. And he's like a little Tasmanian devil. Like, he flies around and he's sociable and he likes to show off. And
that also answered my question, because I was going to ask if you debated having a third child because your first 2 were autistic, and apparently he was an oops.
Yeah, we didn't get a chance to debate it, but we have talked about maybe having a 4th, but I think we're not gonna, because I think the 3
autistic is a lot to deal with. Oh
yeah, you've already got 3, and 3 autistic or not any kids. I mean, that's a lot of work no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, I don't have to deal with it because I'm at work all day. So in all fairness, like, it'd be selfish of me to say, yeah, we're having another kid, because it's my
she's
wife
the one who has to.
That's at home.
Are all your podcasts your work, or do you have a regular 9-to-5 job as well, or is it just the podcasts?
No, I have a 7-to-4 job. So I'm an engineer. Telecommunications engineer is the official title. But basically, I put fiber optic cable in the ground so people can get faster broadband. It's in Edinburgh, being such an old city, the kind of boxes that we've got in the ground and the kind of ducts that go under houses and under the ground are quite old. So it's quite a challenge actually to get,
like, upgrading them and stuff.
Yeah, because no one thought 50 years ago when they were putting these in that anyone would actually go back into them. So we open them up, and sometimes these haven't been opened up for like 50, 60 years. So you do see some sights.
That's like from a horror movie. Like, you open an old thing in the ground and something crazy comes out.
And then you're haunted. The end.
You're a busy guy then, between what you have the whole podcast network and your job and 3 kids and your wife. Like, how do you do it all?
I usually don't go to bed till about 2 a.m.
Wow.
But I don't.
You're living life to the fullest with all of the time.
So normally what would happen if we weren't in like a pandemic is I'd be coaching basketball. So basically I've replaced coaching basketball with a podcast. And then out of that podcast came a second one and a third one. We've got a 4th one on the way. So it's been, it started off as a bit of a joke doing a podcast, because I was kind of like, I want to talk sports. No one will want to hear me. I'll do 5 episodes and no one will listen. So I'll just stop. But I did 5 episodes and people listened. And I was kind of like, oh, well, I'll maybe do a couple more, see how it goes. And then I met a lady on Facebook, Katie Brinkley, because I couldn't carry off an NFL show myself because my knowledge is good, but it's not like amazing. So I kind of was looking for a guest or a co-host, and I bumped into Katie Brinkley on Facebook in one of these kind of group chat things. She was like, yeah, I'll come do it. And we did our first episode without even talking to each other beforehand. And we were just kind of messaging each other because she's from Colorado. So we kind of just decided, let's go for it. So we did our first episode, and it was only going to be a guest spot, but it was kind of apparent to me that she knew football really, really, really well. And I said to her, like, can we do this again next week? And she's like, yeah, fine. I love talking football. And we just kind of went. As the season went on, we were doing 2 episodes a week. Plus I was doing an NBA episode, and we just kept going, and people kept listening, and we're getting ratings and reviews and all that kind of stuff, and it was great, and it felt
It was
great.
meant to
And
be.
yeah. And then she said, have you thought about doing a hockey podcast? And I was like, well, I'm not really a big hockey guy. So it's never been, I mean, other than watching the Mighty Ducks when I was a kid, it's not really anything I've thought about.
God, I love the Mighty Ducks.
Yeah. But her husband, Josh, is a big hockey fan. He's a big Avalanche fan.
Okay.
He was like, yeah, I'll do it. And I was like, well, okay. Because the whole concept of Across the Pond was me covering sports from across the pond.
Right.
But it's kind of evolved, and now it's across the pond. We've got a host in the UK and a host in the US. So
that's perfect.
So I do the NFL, NBA. Katie's like the NFL American side. And we've got Josh and Chris who do the NHL. So Josh is the American side and Chris is in England. And then the MLB, Jasha from Atlanta. He's a former baseball player. And we've got 2 girls from England, Molly and Tracy, who are going to co-host that show with them. And then I've got Across the Pond WNBA podcast, which we're going to launch probably towards the end of April. So
amazing.
And we've managed to get a former WNBA draftee to co-host that with me, because I like basketball. I've been following the WNBA for the last few years, so it's kind of a project that I wanted to take on. Like I say, we've got a website, we've got kind of everything going. So it kind of, the girl who does our voiceovers is from Chicago as well. So it kind of made sense that, I just keep going.
I love it.
Until people stop listening, and people haven't stopped listening yet. So I'm just going to keep going.
And that was your sign that it was something that you were meant to do. Like, I'm a big believer in universal signs. So it was just your sign that you were meant to podcast.
And it's weird because I've never done any kind of media ever, let alone sports media. So for me, it's been a bit of a learning curve. But, managing to get guests on and stuff is something that I thought would be impossible. But I've managed to get Kerith Burke of the Golden State Warriors to come in. She's a sideline reporter for them. Niall Campbell. And we've had Ian Mendes from The Athletic. So
that's awesome.
Done really, really well at getting some pretty decent guests. I think the next level is obviously players. That's probably something that will just come with time as well. And this is the thing, I don't have any ego or anything. So I think I'm probably best to do this because of that. Because I think I've seen a lot of networks and a lot of podcasts where people have, a bit of an ego. It kind of puts people off. The fact that we've had guests return to us and come back and do episodes time and again, like Jenna Harner, she did her 3rd episode with us just last night. It's not released yet, but she had done 2 NFL shows with me and Katie. And then last night she did an NHL show with Josh and Chris. So even she was crossing over to another podcast, which was great.
That's so fun. I think your Scottish accent helps too, because I could listen to it all day.
I know, right?
That's where we got all our American listeners from. Just me talking.
They're like, we just want to hear the Scottish accent. I don't know anything about basketball, but I'm listening.
I feel like the same way about our podcast. We don't have the ego, so it's like, we'll just keep doing it, and hopefully we keep getting listeners. That's my personal point of view. Rietta is more in it for, no, let's get this thing rolling. I want more listeners. This is my job, and I'm like, cool. I'll be here interviewing people. Sounds good.
No, I'm more just I ask anybody I can. If somebody, the worst people can do is say no. So I'm going to, if I think somebody is interesting and I think they'll be a fun guest, I'm going to ask them. And if they say no, they say no. And it is what it is.
That's the funny thing. I've had a no before. I've only had one no since I started. She was working for Sky Sports NFL. And about 2 months after she said no, she had posted on Instagram saying she was bored because of lockdown, because we went back into lockdown after Christmas. So I messaged her and I was like, you said you were busy before. Do you fancy
now you're bored?
Podcast now?
Yeah.
Exactly. I didn't put it like that. That was a lot more.
I know. I know you didn't say that.
And she messaged me back straight away. Yeah, no problem. So because I kind of been polite about it and not being a douche, she was happy to come on.
Yeah. And if you're ever interested, I don't know if it would interest you or not. My uncle actually used to play for the Vikings back in the 70s. Right. So if you want an old school player, I can definitely ask him. And again, worst he can do is say no, but he's a fun guy.
My mom still has the purple Vikings jacket he gave her.
Yeah, he's so much fun. And actually his son, my cousin, played for the Broncos as well. It runs in the family. They're big dudes.
Really, I can hear if Katie's going to listen to this, because Katie's a big Broncos fan. Katie's going to be like, what's his name? Who is he?
Ben Hamilton, he was a linesman, so it's not going to be like, he's not like a running back or anything. He's not going to be super well known. But I mean, if she knew the Broncos well
Katie
enough,
will still know. Yeah,
yeah. He played for them for 10 years. So
wow, and you know what? In the NFL to play 10 years, that's some pretty good going, because those careers do not last long.
Yeah, and he actually had a pretty good concussion, and I think it was only a few years after that he was like, and he's got 5 kids, so he's like, I'm done. He's a high school math teacher now.
Wow, that's a turnaround.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah. Well, he's
very different job.
He's got a degree in like electrical engineering, so he's very, very intelligent.
A lot of these footballers are, because they're made to go to college beforehand, and that's where UK sport falls down. UK sport, you start playing when you're 16, you turn pro.
Yeah.
Wow.
You don't go to college, you don't go to university, you play sports. Whereas in the States, it's a lot more sensible. They send you to
probably the only
college.
time somebody would say that. Us being sensible? I'm just kidding.
But it's true, and like Dennis Rodman could have been a doctor. And for me, when you look at him, obviously when he was playing in the 90s, he had that green, purple hair and all the rest of it. You're like, what, that guy could be a doctor? But he was intelligent. There was no doubt about it. And he
very much so.
Did pre-med when he was in college. So
I'm definitely going to be listening to the hockey podcast, because I run an all-women's fantasy league. We've been doing it for, I think 8 years now, and we love it. It's so much fun. So that's my sport, that and baseball.
But we've just started Across the Pond MLB as well. So that the first episode kind of came out this week, and it was really just an intro to them. And then next week they're going to kind of hit the ground running and keep going.
Have to listen to that for sure too. Actually, the guy I went to high school with is the announcer for the White Sox. So
oh, really?
It's always fun to see people how they're coming out in sports. It's great. Yeah, Jason Benetti. I don't know if you know well enough, Connie. I don't. But yeah, he's like the color guy for the Sox on TV. I went to high school with him.
Awesome.
All right, so I think I have one last question. If a genie gave you 3 wishes, what would you wish for and why? I'm throwing in some fun ones here.
Okay. 3 wishes. Wow.
And why?
And why? Lifetime supply of steaks.
Yeah. And after my own heart.
Because you need iron.
Yes. And steak is delicious.
Yeah. A trip to Hawaii, because that's on my bucket list anyway. Definitely a trip to Hawaii.
All expenses paid now.
Oh yeah,
to Hawaii. I mean, you have a genie. Got to make it all expenses paid.
And I want to make sure I'm in the penthouse suite as well, first class and all that.
Has to be. You're asking a genie. Sky's the limit.
And probably a season ticket to the Utah Jazz.
Ooh, all right.
Makes
sense for that.
I knew there was going to be a sports something in there.
Yeah,
I knew it at some point.
I knew too.
And probably I'd have to throw in a meet and greet with Donovan Mitchell with that, because he's a player that has got so much maturity for such a young guy. I love how he kind of goes about his business, and he's, for a young guy, I look up to him. So just the way how he kind of presents himself off the court as much as on it.
That says a lot about a person, that you look up to him, even though he's younger. That really speaks volumes of the kind of character he has.
Yeah, he does so much. Like ever since he was drafted, like he didn't go out and go crazy buying cars and all the rest of it. He bought a car for his mum. He bought a house for his mum, and he's very much family orientated. He looks after his little sister, and he does a lot of things in the Utah community that, although I'm not in Utah, I get to hear about it because I've got friends and family there. So, and yeah, he's just such a kind of mature guy that you're just kind of I think a lot of people are drawn to him.
Yeah.
And that's probably why Utah have managed to get some of the free agents that they have over the last couple of years, because they've seen what he's been able to do there.
Well, we're gonna put the juju out there that maybe you won't need the genie, and he'll come and be
He'll
on your
help you
podcast,
yes.
or you'll meet him, or whatever it may be.
That would be awesome.
And you'll go to Hawaii and get lifetimes full steaks.
Oh yeah.
Telling you, house swap, man.
I mean, it's not a horrible idea.
Oh my gosh, my husband would be in heaven. He is a huge, well, we both are Scotch and whiskey people, so we'd be like, let's go all the distilleries.
They're all up north, so but you'd have a good base to start from.
That's all right. That's all I need is a base.
So this is how to deal when shit gets real. Thank you for coming and talking to us, James. Check us out on Instagram. Leave us reviews. Message us if you want to interview with us. And we'll see you all next time.